All right, let's dive right into this. I want you to just close your eyes for a quick second and picture a cinematic, high-definition scene in your mind. Imagine this ancient, dimly lit study room. There's a single candle flickering, and it's casting these long, deep shadows over a worn parchment filled with ancient Hebrew letters. Now imagine the camera panning down into those physical words, going right through the ink, and suddenly pulling you into a vast, invisible spiritual architecture. We're talking about a reality completely beyond time, place, and motion. Welcome to our explainer today. We are going to decode one of the most profound, complex, and honestly most misunderstood ancient mystical texts in human history, the writings of the Kabbalists, specifically focusing on the framework laid out in Talmud Eser Sefirot. If you're someone seeking a focused, structured understanding of how reality is actually coded, you are in the exact right place.
So, here is the ultimate paradox that we have to confront on day 1, minute 1 of this study. The ancient texts are absolutely overflowing with highly physical, spatial, and dynamic terms. You're going to read about things like or, which means light, makom for space, halal for avoid. You'll see words like kav for a straight line, eagle for a circle, ma'ala for up, mata for down. It talks about expanding lights and shattering vessels. And yet, the very first unbreakable rule established in Talmud Eser Sefirot is that the spiritual realm has absolutely zero physical dimensions. It is, and I quote, devoid of time, space, and motion. Okay, so how does that work? How can a text describe a physical event like a vessel breaking or light traveling if there is literally no physical space for it to travel through and no time for the event to unfold? How do you map an architecture that has no physical shape? My co-host and I debate this exact friction all the time because this paradox is the ultimate barrier to entry. And today, we are going to break that barrier down completely.
Here is our roadmap for the journey. We're going to start with beyond time and space and the limits of human language. Then we'll look at the immense danger of literalism, followed by unlocking the core mechanic, the secret of branch language. After that, we'll get into a source code versus interface analogy, dive deep into the Kabbalistic glossary, and finally, wrap up by connecting everything back to the root. It's going to be a deep dive, so let's get into it.
Section 1. Beyond time and space, the limits of human language. To really understand this text, we first have to understand the limits of our own minds. Think about your entire vocabulary right now. Every single word you know, every concept you can articulate, it's all built exclusively on physical sensory experiences. I mean, we know what bright is because we have physical eyes that process photons. We understand before and after because we live on a linear timeline. But what happens when world-class mystical scholars experience a reality that has none of these things? How do you write a textbook about a dimension where our 5 senses are completely useless, where time doesn't tick, and where nothing occupies physical space? Well, this brings us to the formal definition of ruchniut, or spirituality. When people use this word today, they usually think of, a vague feeling of peace or maybe some ghost-like glowing mist. But in this exact science, ruchniut has a rigorous, strict definition. It is a reality completely abstracted from all physical properties. No time, no place, no motion, and crucially, no imaginary sensory perceptions. Because the spiritual lacks these properties entirely, using words like up, down, or light to describe it is inherently dangerous. It's kind of like trying to describe the taste of a strawberry using only mathematical equations. The tool just doesn't fit the subject. Yet the sages had to write these texts to pass the wisdom down. They had to use human language, even with all its heavy physical baggage. Which naturally leads us to a massive, critical question. If spirituality has no physical shape or space whatsoever, why on earth do the Kabbalists relentlessly write about circles, straight lines, distances, upper worlds, and lower worlds? Why write about a line of light, a kav, descending into a circle, an igel, if none of these shapes actually exist there? Think about it. If we take these words literally, the texts seem utterly absurd, like a bizarre fantasy novel. The answer is that they are not describing geometry. They are describing something much, much deeper, using the absolute only vocabulary available to human beings. But before we reveal exactly how they do it, we absolutely have to understand the catastrophic error most people make when reading this stuff. Section 2. The danger of literalism. The trap of Hagshamah. This brings us to the immense danger of literalism, which in the sources is known as Hagshamah, or materializing the text. When a beginner opens these texts and reads about a light entering a vessel, their brain just automatically generates an image of a glowing beam of light pouring into a physical cup. That right there, that is Hagshamah. It traps the mind in a false physical imagination.
The sources warn incredibly strongly that if you allow your mind to project physical shapes, distances, or colors, like red for restriction or white for giving, onto the creator or the spiritual world, you are entirely corrupting the study. It's essentially idolatry of the mind. Just look at the comparison we're making here. The physical reading imagines literal light, spatial distances, and geometric circles. But the spiritual reading, the true reading, understands that these words are pure code. In the spiritual reading, distance, like karav for close or rachok for far, doesn't mean miles or kilometers. It means a difference in qualities, a causal relationship. A circle isn't a shape drawn with a compass. It represents a specific, non-spatial state of equality where there is no up or down in importance. The physical words are just placeholders for abstract causal forces.
The author of our source text, Baal HaSulam, issues a really stark warning about this trap. He writes that those who haven't learned how to decode this language are like the blind groping a wall, for they will not understand a single word in its true meaning. Man, what a powerful image. If my co-host were sitting right here, they'd be screaming, "Warning, this is where people get stuck." And they'd be right, because you can read thousands of pages, memorize all the complex charts, know every single Hebrew term, but without the proper decodering, your study leads to total confusion. You'll end up worshiping a physical idol of your own imagination, completely misunderstanding the creator and the architecture of reality. We must have a reliable system to translate these words.
Section 3. Secret of Branch Language. Sfat ha'anafim. Fortunately, the Kabbalists didn't just leave us in the dark to figure this out. They designed a brilliant, flawless protocol to solve this exact problem, an interface known as Sfat ha'anafim, the secret of the language of branches. This is literally the master key to the entire system. Once you understand this protocol, you stop reading the words as physical descriptions, and you start reading them as pointers to invisible causal mechanics. Let me walk you through this precise, step-by-step cosmic engineering protocol. Step 1. Everything begins in the upper world. This is the root. Every single force, law, and reality originates in the spiritual dimension. Step 2. That spiritual force cascades down, step by step, dimension by dimension, until it manifests in our physical world. This physical manifestation is the branch. Step 3. The sages, observing this perfect correlation, simply borrow the earthly name of the branch to point directly back to its invisible root. They don't use the word to describe the physical object. They use the physical object's name to call out the spiritual force that created it. So, if we look at the formal definition of Sfat ha'anafim, the language of branches, it is a precise vocabulary where physical words are used solely to point to their causal, non-spatial spiritual roots. The sages didn't just guess at these words, okay? They weren't writing poetry or metaphors. The text is very clear. Just as two hairs do not feed from a single pore, no two branches share the exact same root. It is a strict one-to-one mapping. Think of it like a cosmic server mapping perfectly to our physical world. They utilized a ready-made language where the earthly branch perfectly indicates its spiritual root, allowing them to write a whole textbook about the invisible without ever describing it physically. They are mapping the operating system of reality.
Section 4. Source Code versus Interface, the Cosmic Engineering Protocol.
We can actually understand this ancient concept beautifully using modern technology. For instance, if you want the video game version for kids, the branches are the game symbols on your screen, but the roots are the hidden code that actually makes the game work. If you take a little mushroom icon literally, you miss the real power. It's just code. But if you want the cosmic engineering version for adults, think of it as cloud architecture versus user interface. The physical language is a precise protocol, translating non-spatial causal relations, the backend, into human vocabulary, the UI. Let's look at this breakdown to really lock the metaphor in. Think about a computer screen. You might see a folder icon. That's the branch, the UI icon. But what is it really? Is there actual paper inside your phone? Of course not. The root, the back-end code, is a data storage protocol. In our ancient text, the term for this is kli, or vessel. When you adjust your screen brightness, you see light, the branch. But the back-end reality is an energy flow, an electrical current. In our text, this is or, light. When you drag a file across your desktop, you see movement, the branch. But the back-end reality isn't physical travel. It's a change of state, allocating data from one sector to another. In the text, this is chenua, movement. Physical words are just UI icons on our human screen. The spiritual concepts are the invisible back-end code.
Just to drive this metaphor entirely home, mistaking the physical word for the actual spiritual object is exactly like thinking there is a literal manila paper folder hiding inside your computer monitor. It's absurd, right? Just as you intuitively know there is no physical paper inside your screen, You must train your mind to intuitively know there is no physical light, no geometric circle, no literal empty space in the spiritual worlds. The text uses earthly language solely to awaken understanding, never to describe bodies, shapes, or physical events in the Creator.
Section 5, the Kabbalistic Glossary, translating the terms. All right, now that we have our decoder ring, our cosmic matrix decoder, let's translate some of the most specific foundational terms directly from the source text. We're going to strip away the physical interface and look directly at the spiritual back-end code. First up, the most common word, Ohr, translated as light. If you imagine brightness, remember you are trapped in Hagshamah. According to the source, Ohr is the spiritual abundance, the shefa, received from the Creator. It is completely devoid of physical brightness. Light is just the branch word, the UI icon, because in our physical world, the sun's light is the absolute closest thing we have to an all-encompassing, life-giving force that sustains everything without depleting itself. But the root concept is simply divine abundance, the pure attribute of absolute giving and bestowal. We also see terms like Ohr Yashar, direct light, and Ohr Hozer, reflected light. These aren't laser beams bouncing off mirrors. They are causal flows of intent, giving and receiving. Next, we have Kli, translated as vessel. Again, delete the image of a clay pot or a golden cup from your mind right now. The text defines a Kli exclusively as the will to receive, the Ratzon LeKabel, the abundance. The size of a spiritual vessel is not measured in inches or gallons. It is determined entirely by the magnitude of its desire. A massive desire to receive creates a massive spiritual vessel. If there is no desire, there is no vessel, and therefore no place for the light to be received, because in spirituality, the desire itself is the space. The desire is the makom. Then we have tenuah, or movement. The source is exceptionally precise here. Spiritual movement means a renewal or change of form. It is not physical travel from point A to point B. In our physical world, things are separated by physical space. But in the spiritual world, entities are separated by a disparity of form. If a spiritual entity acquires a new attribute or a new desire, it has moved. When the text talks about hippashtut, expansion, or histeldelkut, departure, it's not a balloon blowing up and shrinking. It's a flow of data. It strictly means an energy became more coarse, or acquired a greater will to receive, changing its spiritual properties, not its physical location. So this brings us to a crucial point, understanding one of the most famous concepts, Tzimtzum, translated as restriction or contraction. Often people imagine a giant, physical, glowing light shrinking into the corners of a spatial void to make room for the universe. Listen, that is the ultimate physical trap. Tzimtzum is not a physical shrinking of space. It was the deliberate, intentional removal of the will to receive. The vessel restricted its own desire in order to achieve similarity of form with the pure giving nature of the Creator. It's a change in operating protocol, a firewall installed by the receiver, not a spatial contraction. Now, concepts like Masach, the spiritual firewall or screen, or Zivog, the spiritual coupling or collision of forces, and Rashamot, the data cache or memory trace left behind, these are mapped out exhaustively in the subsequent parts of this text, but I want to stress, their entire foundation relies on this exact rule we're discussing today. None of them are physical objects. They are data states. To actively protect your mind from physical imagination as you read any of these texts, you must adopt this exact three-step mental process, running continuously in the background of your mind like antivirus software. Step 1, read the physical word, the branch. Step 2, immediately actively strip away its physical properties, no shape, no distance, no color. Step 3, identify the causal non-spatial spiritual reality, the root. If you read, the light descended into the vessel, your brain should instantly process the divine abundance manifested into a newly formed, coarser desire to receive. This is exactly how you read the matrix. Section 6, connecting to the root, the purpose of the study. Which leads us to the ultimate question. I mean, why go through all this effort? Why read text that requires such a rigorous, almost exhausting translation process in our minds? It's not just intellectual gymnastics or theoretical physics. The authors of these texts, like Baal HaSulam, mapped the source code of reality so that we could align our own dimensions with it. In the introduction to the text, the author reveals the true secret behind the language of branches. He writes that even if you don't fully comprehend the vast complexities of the cosmos, merely studying these roots properly, knowing that you are looking at the source code of reality and not physical shapes, connects you directly to the upper abundance. The light within it reforms them to the good. because the words we read down here are the exact branches of the highest spiritual roots. Engaging with them correctly acts as a direct link, a conduit, pulling the back-end clarity and pure intention into our earthly UI interface. You now have the master key. Every time you encounter these concepts, ask yourself, are you reading the code of reality, or are you just staring at the icons? Thank you for joining us for this complete journey through the Pardes. We hope these ancient truths help you and your family improve your own dimensions this week. If you enjoyed this full chapter deep dive, please like, subscribe, and share which part of the journey touched your soul in the comments. We'll see you in the next chapter.